Verstappen dodges a race ban by hours. Hamilton hit with a brutal 10-second penalty and he is furious. FIA rulings are under fire from team bosses and legends alike. With the Brazilian GP looming, this isn't over, it's only just begun. Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton have clashed many times before, but what happened in Mexico wasn't just another wheel-to-wheel battle. It became a flashpoint, one that reignited old rivalries and brought the FIA's consistency into question yet again. A bold lunge by Verstappen at turn 1 triggered a chain reaction. Wheels touched. Momentum shifted. And just a few corners later, Hamilton, trying to recover, ran wide, skipped the rejoin line, and re-entered the race dramatically ahead of several drivers. The reaction from the stewards was immediate, but the aftershock? That was only just beginning. By lap 6, Hamilton was under investigation for gaining a lasting advantage. 10 seconds was the verdict. And while some saw it as fair application of the rules, others saw hypocrisy. Verstappen, earlier in the race, had also gone off track. Twice. Once while defending, once while regaining control after contact. He received no penalty. The question echoed across garages and grandstands alike: where is the line? And why does it seem to move depending on the name and the team? That's where the FIA finds itself once more at the center of a credibility storm. Fred Vasseur, Ferrari's team boss, didn't hold back. He called the decision a joke. Former champions lined up to give their views. Some, like Villeneuve, defended Verstappen. Others, including seasoned stewards from past eras, said the rules were clear and not evenly applied. In a season already bursting with tension, the inconsistency of officiating has become a storyline of its own. And in this case, the consequences may reach far beyond Mexico. Because now, as we head into Brazil, the ripple effects of that moment become more serious. Verstappen, cleared of any penalty points and riding fresh off an aggressive but legally clean drive, enters Interlagos with confidence and a car that's improving every weekend. Red Bull's RB21 is no longer unpredictable, it's tuned. And with Verstappen back in control of his own fate, the mathematics of the title begin to shift. He is no longer just a disruptor. He is a threat. Hamilton, meanwhile, faces a storm of a different kind. He has now driven 19 races for Ferrari without a podium, a brutal record in the team's long history. And after Mexico, he doesn't just face pressure from fans and media, but from within. Ferrari expected fireworks. So far, they've only seen smoke. Now, heading into one of his most successful tracks, Hamilton must do more than deliver. He must overcome technical limitations, strategic doubt, and public skepticism. The 10-second penalty wasn't just a time loss. It was a psychological blow. It all began with a familiar scene: Hamilton and Verstappen, wheel-to-wheel, two titans of modern Formula One fighting for inches. On lap 4 of the Mexican Grand Prix, Hamilton tried an ambitious move around the outside of Verstappen into turn 4. He braked late, locked the front right slightly, and in that split second, the car drifted beyond the edge of the racing line. He didn't spin. He didn't lose control. But he did what the rulebook calls leaving the track and gaining a lasting advantage. He rejoined without giving up the position, and that's where the real issue started. The rejoin itself wasn't clean. Hamilton skipped the official return line marked by the FIA for safe integration back into the race. Instead of yielding or slotting behind the cars he had overtaken off track, he drove across the grass, avoided the re-entry cone, and emerged ahead not just of Verstappen, but of George Russell and Oliver Bearman too. It was the kind of visual that gets clipped and shared instantly. And the kind that demands an answer from race control. Within 2 laps, the stewards launched an investigation. The decision? A 10-second time penalty. No need to pit again, no black and white flag, just 10 seconds added post-race. It dropped Hamilton from 3rd to 8th and erased any hope of a podium. But what lit the paddock on fire was this: just a few laps earlier, Verstappen had gone off track twice, once in the same corner, and had not been penalized. His defenders argued that he gave the position back. His critics said it didn't matter, he still breached track limits. Either way, the contrast between the two outcomes was stark. The optics couldn't be worse. To Ferrari fans, it was déjà vu. Another high-profile incident involving Hamilton, and again, the ruling seemed to swing against him with disproportionate force. Fred Vasseur immediately questioned the logic. He gained no advantage in the end, Vasseur said. And Verstappen cut the track and got nothing. Meanwhile, Hamilton was left stunned. On team radio, he called it ridiculous, and added that the decision had killed his race. Whether emotional or rational, his frustration was justified. He wasn't just racing the Red Bull. He was racing the stewards. But the problem runs deeper than one incident. In a sport where a tenth of a second can change a race result, consistency is the only acceptable currency. Drivers and teams build strategies around precedent. They expect similar rulings for similar scenarios. When that consistency breaks down, trust begins to erode. And in this case, with a world champion at Ferrari and a three-time champion at Red Bull, the spotlight burns hotter than ever. Every ruling becomes political. Every advantage becomes suspect. The Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez is no ordinary track. Sitting over 2,000 meters above sea level, it strips cars of downforce and robs engines of oxygen. Cooling becomes a nightmare, brakes run hotter, and tire degradation spikes unpredictably. This kind of environment exposes everything from aerodynamic weaknesses to engine mapping inefficiencies. Verstappen's RB21 came into the weekend with two crucial changes, a reshaped floor and an upgraded edgewing, both aimed at improving stability in mid-speed corners. It worked. The car was planted where others slid. But what made Verstappen's performance so precise wasn't just the hardware, it was the harmony between man and machine. For the first time in months, Red Bull engineers publicly admitted they had adjusted the setup around Max's feedback rather than defaulting to simulation logic. They softened the rear slightly, improved mechanical grip, and gave Verstappen a more linear torque curve on throttle exit. These changes made him feel connected to the car again. In Mexico, every corner looked effortless. No overcorrection. No twitch. Just precision. It wasn't dominance through power, it was dominance through balance. Ferrari came into Mexico with no upgrades. The SF25 has proven strong on low-speed traction and front-end response, but it remains temperamental at the rear. Hamilton, pushing hard through Sector 2, struggled to keep the rear tires within temperature windows. His lap times in FP3 were inconsistent not from error, but from the car failing to respond identically each lap. In high-altitude conditions, this inconsistency only grows. Ferrari lacked not just aero development, but adaptability. And while Charles Leclerc managed to extract a strong qualifying performance, Hamilton spent the entire weekend chasing grip that never fully arrived. This makes Brazil a completely different proposition. Interlagos is lower in altitude but just as technically demanding. The short lap punishes poor exits, and the combination of tight corners and sweeping curves demands a flexible, responsive chassis. Red Bull's recent changes give Verstappen a decisive advantage here. His car is no longer skittish at the rear. He can lean on it with full confidence. If the team continues to refine around his feel, we could see the kind of dominance he showed at Spa or Suzuka, not in straight-line speed, but in consistency per sector. Hamilton, meanwhile, is walking into Brazil with a car that's nearly identical to what he had in Mexico. No confirmed upgrades. No major setup overhauls. That puts enormous pressure on the garage to deliver perfection in execution. The tire selection for Interlagos offers some hope. The medium compound has worked well for Ferrari in the past, but it's clear they're arriving without the setup flexibility Red Bull now enjoys. And on a track where grip can swing lap by lap with the weather, that rigidity could hurt. The real technical gap now isn't horsepower. It's adjustability. Verstappen has the room to fine-tune. Hamilton is locked into compromises. That freedom, combined with Verstappen's feedback-driven development direction, means Red Bull enters Brazil with the clearest engineering edge they've had since the opening rounds of the season. And when Verstappen has a car that behaves exactly as he expects, history tells us what happens next. The aftermath of Mexico left two very different paths for Verstappen and Hamilton. On one side, Verstappen walked away not just penalty-free, but with clarity. His performance was clinical, and more importantly, the FIA's ruling cleared any lingering threats of license penalties. In one race, he avoided the risk of a suspension and secured a car that felt once again built for him. It was a return to control. A return to the conditions that make Max Verstappen lethal, not aggressive chaos, but structured, stable dominance. He didn't just win on Sunday. He walked into Brazil as the most dangerous man on the grid. For Hamilton, the opposite happened. The 10-second penalty didn't just drop him 5 positions, it crushed what little momentum Ferrari had built around him. On paper, it looks like a standard sanction. But when your car is difficult to pass with, and your weekend is built around track position, that penalty doesn't just hurt, it kills. In his mind, the move had merit. In the eyes of the stewards, it didn't. And that disconnect has real consequences. Because for a driver like Hamilton, who operates best with rhythm and flow, this disruption goes beyond stopwatch metrics, it cuts into confidence. There's also the symbolic damage. 19 races into his Ferrari career, and still no podium. That's now the worst opening stretch for any Ferrari driver in the modern era. Worse than Alesi, worse than Salo, worse even than post-Massa Felipe. For a 7-time world champion, this is uncharted territory. Every missed podium adds pressure. Every setback invites questions about whether the move was right, whether Ferrari can deliver, and whether age or politics are starting to catch up. These questions don't always have answers, but they always echo. And here's where Verstappen capitalizes. His championship hopes were thought dead in the summer. McLaren had the lead. Piastri and Norris were battling one another. Verstappen was simply too far back. But now, after Mexico, the door reopens. He sits just 36 points behind the leader, and with Brazil offering a sprint and full race format, there are 58 points on the table. If the trend continues, and Red Bull's package remains strong, Verstappen could erase the deficit in a single weekend. From an outsider to a contender in just 4 races. The psychological contrast could not be clearer. Verstappen heads to Interlagos with momentum, trust in his team, and a package that responds to his driving style. He knows the feeling of taking control late in a title run. He's done it before. In 2022, in 2021. Hamilton, by contrast, arrives carrying emotional weight. His race engineer, his strategists, even his own tone on the radio have become more cautious, more frustrated. This isn't the Lewis who sent it around the outside of Rosberg in Austin. It's a Lewis searching for traction, both literal and symbolic. And Brazil won't wait. It's one of the most dynamic tracks on the calendar. Rain is almost guaranteed at some point. Tire strategy, pit stops, and bravery on wet curves will decide everything. Verstappen has triumphed here in the storm. Hamilton has made history from the back of the grid. But only one of them comes in rising. Only one leaves Mexico with answers instead of doubts. And with 3 races left after Sao Paulo, this is the moment where momentum turns into destiny or fades into regret.